Welcome to the Meetings Podcast, the meeting organizer's podcast source for what's new in the meetings and events industry. Meetings Podcast is a conversation with a variety of voices that looks at events, meetings, and media. Meetings Podcast is sponsored by IMEX America, America's worldwide exhibition for incentive travel, meetings, and events.
Hey, podcast listeners. This is Mike. Thank you for tuning in once again. I wanted to thank IMEX America for sponsoring. I also wanted to thank a new sponsor, thepodcastguys.com, and they're doing podcasting for events. So think about a year-round show for your event, gearing up when it gets close to your event, at your event, and then after your event, year-round, that you can engage, educate, and entertain your specific niche or your space that you're in. Check out thepodcastguys.com and they will set it all up for you. They take care of all the technical and the creative around your event, so you don't have to, because we know you don't have time to do that. So let's get into the show, and thank you so much again for listening, and I'll be back at the end to wrap it all up. All right, welcome back to the Meetings Podcast. This is Mike McAllen, and today we have Brittany Metz. Is that how you say your last name?
Metz, like
Metz.
The baseball team, yeah.
Oh, you are, you're not a typical community manager. You have a cynical sense of humor and a background in design. And when you're not managing the community, you're in front of a crowd doing improv in the Mission in San Francisco.
Yeah. So that's most of the stuff I do is just like either watching like stand-up comedy or doing comedy improv, and I think it does kind of help with a stressful work life, and then getting to debrief a little.
So you are the community manager at Blab, I should say, too, because we are on Blab doing this. But I didn't mention that at all. So whoever's listening to the podcast, like, who, what? So that's great. So improv helps you, which you wrote to me, helps you with dealing with issues in the community. Also being able to jump on and have discussions with people. It's important to listen, which is right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of listening. Usually it's best to let other people speak and address their concern without being defensive or jumping back and saying, no, you're wrong. We fixed that. It's kind of a lot of listening and taking notes of what people are saying and then just letting them know they were heard.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's a lot of it, isn't it? That's with all businesses, it seems like. People just want to be heard. You can tell them if they have a huge problem, you could just be like, oh, yes, and acknowledge that. So the podcast, it's the Meetings Podcast. It's a lot of meetings people. And I noticed that I went to your meetup that you had the other night, had a fantastic time. It was really nice people. Everybody at Blab is so nice. Like all the people that work there, like I chatted with a bunch of different people, and everybody was just so darn nice. You're very lucky to be working there.
Yeah, I think we all have a pretty good chemistry together. So they all put up with me. That says a lot. They're very patient people.
So why don't you start out this with your favorite quote?
So I had to think about it, and then I realized if I had a favorite quote, it'd be something Bill Murray says. And he said, people say I'm difficult, and sometimes that's a badge of honor. That's very fitting for me in general. I can be difficult and weird, and I'll do things that are a little not traditional, untraditional, if you will. And people put up with it, and they're just like, okay, I don't know what you're doing, but sometimes it pays off. And I like to take a difficult, untraditional route to things, and people let me do that here.
Very cool. And so how did you get to become a community manager and at Blab?
So most people who become community managers, I'd like to say it's by accident. So that's exactly what happened. I was going to school for design, and one of the designers reached out to me to do illustration design work for Bebo. And I did a sample kind of drawing, and I was like in my senior year of design school. So I did a sample, sent it in, and they loved it. So I was working with them on Bebo, kind of 30 hours a week while in school full time. And eventually, right before I had to finish my senior year, I needed to commit more time into work. And when you already have a job that you love, it doesn't make sense to keep paying for school that's supposed to get you that job.
Mm-hmm.
So I dropped out of school 3 months before graduating for like the full-time lead artist position. Once Bebo didn't work after like a year and a half or so, I was on our little break off team that went to hackathon the idea for Blab. As soon as we were done, I was like, oh shit, we just created something that has no job for me. There is no artist position here. We have 2 super talented designers. So shit. And I think I struggled for a few months, like trying to figure out where my role was, what I'm good at. And it's recently come together that accidentally people were calling me a community manager. And I'm like, no, I'm just the one talking to you guys and like sending you emails and writing blog posts. And I was like, oh shit, that's kind of that job. So now I play the same kind of role, but more of the off the wall version of it, I guess.
How funny. So what is Bebo? What was Bebo? Or what is Bebo?
So Bebo was an old social networking site that was really popular in the UK. Michael Birch sold it to AOL for $860 something million and recently bought it back for $1 million. And he's like, okay, let's just recreate it and do something different. So we had a chat app with like little avatars that you create of yourself, and you would type in hashtags and they'd be posed in that position. So for the year I was working on that, I was just drawing every day nonstop.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
So what was the moment was there a moment that you knew that you were in the right position? Was there an aha moment like, oh, this is for me here?
I think it's been in the past few months, I kind of realized this is a good position for me. So I've always thought of myself as a more creative person who doesn't do things very traditionally. And then when I heard, I'm like, okay, now I have to do like the community management side of things. It sounds very like corporate and boring, and I'm not going to be good at this because it's just emailing people, and like that didn't sound fun to me. Mm-hmm. So I was like, how do I make this interesting? And I realized a lot of it is the social side of things that I am really good at. So I'm good at some illustration stuff, but I'm also really good at being social. And I noticed that while going to in-person events and talking to people, jumping on Blabs and just being able to hang out with these people all night. Like, I enjoy our community, and I think understanding them as a user and also just like as someone who spends a lot of time with them is very helpful for this job.
Very cool. Very cool. And so tell us kind of what you do. Take us through like maybe the process of your day of like how it works. What does a community manager do?
So every day is different. There's also 2 community managers on Blab now. When we acquired PodClear, Hannah is also one of our community managers. We both do very different things. So we try to focus on our skill sets. And Hannah will be responding to these long emails and kind of like addressing people's big picture scenario of what they want to do with Blab, or maybe integrating it with their website. I do more of the short form communication. So it's whether it's tweeting back at people, getting new users involved. So I'm trying to manage the Blab Hello show. So we're both on it, and I'm trying to engage as many new users as possible. And that's sort of my goal in coming up with new ways to do that every day. I'll write blog posts, feature blog posts, do product testing, talk to users about user experience. A lot of it's focused on growth, and I'm trying to think of creative ways to do that rather than traditional ways. So I think it's a lot of ideas all the time, but the important part is finding ways to execute and make sure you're tracking what you're doing.
Right. Everything you said seems to me like hours of stuff to do.
There's always something to do, and it's always different. So I'll probably be like redoing assets for the Blab Hello show like today and tomorrow.
Yeah, I got an email from Hannah, I don't know, a while back about all the events that were using Blab, and that kind of interested me. And I thought that our audience might be interested in that also, about how Blab can be used, within events. Besides it being its own event. When I was at that event there at the Blab office, it was funny to see the people sitting in the room, and then it's on the screen, and then all these people that are all over the world chatting, but they were in the room with us, kind of, in a way.
Yeah, and some people would call in from their phone and walk around and show people the party. Yeah. I think that was a really interesting way to use it as an event. And I think I've seen Sales Loft. Oh, is it Sales Loft? They use it at like a bar. So they bring a microphone. They rent out a room, and it's projected. And then their guests that they brought in are all remote. So they're not actually there, but they're the main speakers. So they have a bar full of like 50 people there to listen. And they made Blab the highlight of their event. It's projected on the wall at this. So I think there's really creative ways to use it at events. Probably less traditional ways than just walking around and showing people.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing with now for events, trying to make them more engaging and fun besides just having a bunch of people. So I have a meetup in San Francisco for event professionals, and we are having a hard time because we don't have any money to bring people in to spend on a speaker, but everybody wants to see some speaker. So we next time are showing a TED Talk. We thought, well, we'll show a TED Talk, and then we'll all talk about that TED Talk. And then I emailed the guy who gave the talk, this Jinsup Lee, and it's about, I won't go into what it is, but anyway, he did the talk, and I said, hey, would you like to come in and Skype in, I thought first. And then I started thinking, well, Blab would be even better, because then other people can come in and ask questions and be in the things. Anyway, along those lines, I think it's a really cool way to expand your audience. It's a hybrid kind of a thing. So your hybrid event kind of a thing.
Oh, definitely. I think it also expands the content that you're creating. So sometimes people record podcasts and they'll just push it out, never hear feedback. And sometimes it's great to get that live feedback. Or if people are really excited about something, they tell you in the moment and you're like, okay, cool. I don't have to address it, but I know I can get a sense of what people like to hear.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And you cater your content to what the reaction is live.
Yeah. I would like to see how different people are using Blab. Like, it would be so interesting to have, that's when I got that email from her. It showed a bunch of things, and it was like brewery and stuff. It was last year sometime, but anyway, there's like a brewery thing going on. Anyway, let's get back to you. So what do you think about the future? No, hold on. What do you think about the future in your job in Blab? What do you think is going to happen?
I think it's going to become more difficult once we start having multiple communities to manage. So in things like Blab, once it gets super popular in the sports community, there's going to be a whole world of sports people to manage or help or facilitate. And I don't know anything about sports. I don't care about sports. So that's going to be something that would be really difficult for me to manage. So that would be the role of like a sports community manager. And I think ideally I would love to be the community manager for like an entertainment section of like comedy and just people doing talk shows. I think that's a lot of where I see Blab going. And I hope that I would be able to take the reins on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess there's
or managing like a bunch of community managers. That's kind of where you hope it goes, is like, I hope that I can facilitate.
Yeah, no. And I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. That's because you were there at the start of this thing. What are you struggling with right now with your personal and or professional life? You can answer either one of those, like professional or personal, whatever.
I think a lot of the struggles I have professionally are just what I'm doing. There's no playbook on how to do it. So we're doing everything for the first time. And you do things and they fail, and it can become a little demoralizing where you're trying things and the efforts are just not paying off.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's been the most difficult thing that I've had to deal with and learn to accept. It's like, okay, it wasn't a failure. It was a learning experience. So I learned something from that. How can I tweak or alter what I did there and potentially make it more successful? Is it even worth tweaking? So trying to get through that experience is difficult, and watching sometimes things happen and you're like, I couldn't have made that happen. Like, it's Blab spreading a lot by word of mouth, and that's awesome, but it's also very difficult because how do you reproduce and recreate word of mouth internally to control growth? So
interesting.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest struggle.
I should probably back up too, because I'm just realizing like people probably don't know what Blab is. Can you give like a brief description of what Blab is?
Yeah. So, how we're using it now, we can both see each other face to face, and you can unlock the seat, and anyone listening can call in or chime in the comments. So it's an interactive conversation. People can use it in more formal, structured ways, like a podcast or an interview, or they can do it more loosely, where it's just a casual social conversation where maybe they're talking politics, but very casually, and anyone can jump in, anyone can chat, and they're very just like, there's no agenda. Yeah.
So there's 4 places, so 4 people can be in the Blab at one time. And
Yeah.
then there's a chat box on the side so people can ask questions. So there could be like, how many people, what's the maximum amount of people can be in a Blab?
So right now we just push some things out so it can be unlimited numbers of people
Really?
viewing. Yes. And
Wow.
on screen there can be 4. So we maxed it at 4 because it was optimal for conversation. I don't know if you've tried to have conversations with groups of more than 4 people at a time. You'll notice one person or a few people just draw silent and they're not really participating, or it's too chaotic and everyone's trying to participate. So we really figured out 4 is the ideal number.
You're right. I mean, if anyone's been on a conference call, it's like, what the hell's going on? There's a billion people trying to talk.
Yeah. Oh, and it is brought up in the chat that Blabs are all public. So we do focus more on discovery of content rather than maybe coming in for a specific Blab or a specific talk. You can go to the homepage and kind of browse around and see what's happening and join in kind of the similar chat room format.
So let's learn a little bit about you, more about you. What, do you have any, take us through a typical day. Do you have any morning rituals that you do? You don't drink coffee early in the morning.
Oh, I used to. No, I used to. So I used to go out and get coffee every morning. And now I make it myself, but I just kind of forgot to drink it this morning.
Because you're working, huh?
Yeah, so I'm working from home today, just because I have a lot of calls lined up and I don't, and then it can be quiet at my house. But it's usually coffee. I go into work pretty early. So if I go work out before work, I'm up around 5 or 6 a.m. I'll work out, go into work, be the first one there for a few hours. People start to roll in. And some days I get more addicted and hooked into things. So if there's a lot of product discussions or talks going on, I'll stay really late. And this whole year, I'm trying to break old habits. Instead of buying coffee in the morning, I'll make it. And instead of staying at work for 14 hours, I will go in or leave early and come back home to work from home. So I set up a new workspace in my apartment.
Nice.
Yeah.
So what do you want to be as a kid?
I wanted to be an artist, and that is what I told my family since I was 4. And my mom kind of said, well, you can't make money being an artist.
Not
so
true.
I went to school for history. So I have a degree in social history and started going to school for a master's in education. Dropped out of the master's, went to design school, dropped out of design school. And I I lived my dream as being a lead artist. So I proved to my mom that an artist can make a salary. And after that, I was like, okay, so now that I kind of accomplished that goal, do I really want to be an artist forever? Probably not. I want to be something, I'm very verbal and I like to express myself and talk. And I think that is really important in whatever I do. I have to be able to voice my opinion. And that's kind of the benefit now.
Very cool. Very cool. Do you, what book do you gift others? Do you tell people about a book what's their book?
I always tell people to read Girl on a Train, but
what is that about? Is that just a?
Oh yeah, it's kind of book? Like a thriller kind of mystery-ish,
cool.
But it's really good. It was like the book I read that made me really depressed to start reading other books because it was so good. And other than that, I'll recommend like modern romance or Kelly's like comedy stuff. I don't know. It's a lot of like comedians writing books.
Very cool.
That's what I'm about.
And do you listen to any podcasts?
I used to, but I would only really listen to Michael Ian Black's podcasts, as weird as that is. I listened to his podcast with Michael Showalter, Topics, and also Michael and Tom Eat Snacks. And Improv for Humans was a podcast I listened to for a lot. It's really just, I listen to podcasts for comedy and to put in the background of things. And hopefully I'm working on my own podcast based off my favorite kind of comedy podcasts. So we'll see how that goes.
Very cool. And do you listen to any kind of music like Pandora or Spotify channel when you're working, or do you keep it silent?
I listen to Spotify unless I'm listening to Blabs, which are in the background. I'll have like a Spotify radio station on. I really don't know what it is. It's either like weird dance music to keep me awake or super acoustic weird. I don't know. I don't really have a very specific music taste anymore. It's just whatever's on. If it works for my brain, then I'll keep it on.
Makes sense. Have you ever had a nickname?
Well, people used to call me B for a while, and
makes sense.
So I got these like bee tattoos on my arm.
Cool. But, I'm a beekeeper. I have beehives.
Oh, very cool. My screen name in Slack is Bee Pants. So a lot of my coworkers will just call me Bee Pants.
And why?
It was just a username I used. I like logged in.
Oh, it wasn't any kind of a bee incident that happened?
No.
Do you have a favorite documentary or movie?
I really like, I don't remember what it's called, but there was this documentary about ants. I really like bug documentaries.
Interesting.
So anything that you can't really focus on with the naked eye too much is my favorite kind of documentary. Insects, bugs. I think ants are the most fascinating.
Yeah, they're everywhere now, it seems, too, with the rain.
Yeah, that's my favorite. It's like the weirdest thing, but.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
I don't know if I've been given really great advice.
There's still time. It's not over.
It's probably something I've learned doing improv, and it's really the idea of like not shutting other people down, rather than jumping on my instinct to tell people they're wrong right away. Giving people a chance to listen, voice their opinion or state their case, and then kind of, rather than immediately responding, giving myself a second to think or two.
Right, and I think it makes you a very good conversationalist because you're always doing that yes and thing. You're always like helping that other person talk in a way.
Yeah, hopefully they don't shut you down with like one-word answers. But
yeah, but then you can always go right back at them. I mean, and yes, and anyway, I think that's great. What's working for you right now? Do you have a new app, a vitamin exercise program, some sort of a work hack or time saver?
I don't know. I try to get a decent amount of sleep. I drink a lot of water. That's about
Good.
it.
That's great.
So I have a lot of energy all day. I can work on like 5 hours of sleep. I think that's a good amount. And I drink a lot of water, and I'm pretty much wide awake all day.
Yeah, you said Slack too. I know your company uses that, but a lot of people are just kind of discovering Slack. Do you have other things that you like when you wake up in the morning? What do you go to certain websites or something?
Oh, I'm on Twitter right away. Like
Just Twitter,
I open up Twitter, check my notifications, try to respond to people. That's kind of it. I check Twitter and I'll check Slack.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's your favorite event to go to?
Probably like stand-up comedy, anything kind of with comedy based. I like going to New York and going to like those underground comedy clubs. That's basically the only type of event I really enjoy.
Really?
Yeah, I might be a bit of a homebody.
Well, that's great. Oh, that's
but
great.
I really like going out for like comedy, and that's about it.
And they have the Sketchfest stuff. Do you like that stuff that happens? They have like a big conference, a big thing, Sketchfest that comes.
So I've been super busy, so I haven't been able to go to any. But a lot of my friends perform in Sketchfest, so it's a bummer. I'll be missing a lot of it. But also, our team was supposed to apply to be in it, and then we got busy and forgot. So I went last year, maybe, but kind of missed it.
So, kind of the last question here. If you could talk to the high school senior you, what would you tell yourself?
I
guess not listening to your mom about the...
Oh, my mom always gave pretty good advice. So I feel like I would tell myself probably some crap about relationships and like not putting up with shit for too long. So I had to learn that myself for too much. So it's like, I guess after a year, if it sucks, get out as fast as you can.
That's great.
No more. Yeah. So that's probably the advice I would give myself. Save myself a few years of hell.
All right. Well, Brittany, thank you so much. How can people get a hold of you?
So on Twitter, it's at Brittany Metz. Just so got to pronounce all the T's in there. That's probably the fastest way to, or B at Blab.im, but likely will respond to Twitter first.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, that was fun. Thank you for listening all the way through the podcast. And I wanted to thank our sponsors, IMEX America and thepodcastguys.com for your event podcasting. And if you hadn't thought of it yet, that's actually us. We are now doing podcasting for events. So it's really fun. We're calling it thepodcastguys.com is the URL that we had. So we're using that. And it sends you to the Grass Shack Events and Media site. But we've got a whole thing set up. Some things you should know about podcasting. Americans listen to approximately 21,117,000 hours of podcast audio every day. 1/3 of Americans 12 years or older have now say that they have listened to at least one podcast. Podcasting is on the rise. Monthly audio podcast consumption grew from approximately 39 million monthly users in 2014 to approximately 46 million in 2015. So it's something you should think about for your event. You have a lot of content there that you can use year-round to keep your attendees and your members, if you're an association, engaged, educated, and entertained. So it's something to think about. So head over to the Podcast Guys, or you can always call me or tweet me or send up a smoke signal and I'll come and run in and we can talk about podcasting. But we have a couple of clients now that are really enjoying it. So check it out. And again, thanks for listening, and I appreciate you spending the time with me.
We appreciate and thank you for listening to the Meetings Podcast. Please email with any questions or comments to meetingspodcast@gmail.com. Meetings Podcast is sponsored by IMEX America, America's worldwide exhibition for incentive travel, meetings, and events. The Meetings Podcast theme music is brought to you by the Delgado Brothers, which can be found at delgadobrothers.com.